Interesting.
Yeah, it's always, from a TV perspective, Scott, it's interesting for you guys because you want the team to be relevant because that fuels popularity, viewers. But the more relevant you are, the more times you're in prime time, and that, everybody's got to have their piece of the pie, as you mentioned. Now we're getting the first ever streaming only playoff game on Peacock. Only cost them $110 million to get a streaming only game. So, hey, it's where we are. And I think relevancy is more important than anything else. And the Eagles are relevant. So, we'll talk about that schedule. Your thoughts? I think it's pretty good. Obviously, it's tougher. Your first place team, you get a first place schedule, but I like the way it's set up. Easy early. You get a chance to get over those hiccups with the new coaches and things like that. And then the real murders row stretch is later in the season when hopefully you got all that stuff ironed out.
Yeah, I think you hit it right. For me, I like the way it's set up. You get that Thursday night game out of the way week 2, the short week, so you're still. It's not like you're banged and bruised for weeks and then have that short week. You get it out of the way early. And initially when it came out, a lot of people were raising their hands. What is this disrespect? Look at this murderer's row. Every year there's a bit of a murderer's row, and frankly, you knew who the opponents were coming into this. They
Yeah,
had a tough
I always
schedule
do.
coming in. And the people who want to put a lot of stock in the Eagles have the toughest schedule. How many times do we do this in the spring? And then when it actually plays out and you see these teams on the field and coaching changes, and you know how it is. Sometimes there's a team that nobody thought was going to be great, turns out to be great. And there's times that a team on the schedule looks like, oh, this is a juggernaut, and it ends up being a patsy. So I think the jury's going to be out on the strength of schedule. But in that regard as well, you look at it and say, okay, well, the Eagles have the toughest. All right, if you want to buy into that whole thing, well, the Cowboys and Giants are right there behind them. So you want to go, oh, the division. Well, the division's got to play all the same teams roughly. It's a little bit different home and away, and an occasional different opponent down the line. But for me, I think the schedule's fine. I think, and the stuff, Jody, you were talking about before the break, you have 2 new coordinators. So you have a little bit of easier games early on where you can start to get that feel of Jalen Hurts with Brian Johnson and Sean Desai with his players on the defensive side and these young rookies who can get up to speed a little bit more. I think overall, if you're an Eagles fan complaining about the schedule, you need to just stop. Just stop. It's fine. And you need to worry more about the team and not the schedule. Go out there and beat who's on the schedule that week. And hey, you know what? You want to look at something else with TV, you were talking about it. That Niners game. How fun is that going to be? These guys can't get over the fact that the Eagles beat them in that NFC Championship game. Even the coach is like, yeah, I'm glad we're playing them later in the year because we'll have everybody then. Is that what you really think happened? I mean, you guys, the fact that the Eagles are living in their head right now to me is funny.
Yeah, I'm a Brock Purdy fan, so I say, yeah, it would have been a different game if Purdy had played. I think the Eagles would have won. The 49er guys have taken it way too far, basically saying they would have won the game, which is foolish. If you want to say it would have been a much more competitive game because it wasn't competitive, okay, yeah, that's why I'll sidle up with you, but would have won the game, you don't know that.
You might want to block Hassan Reddick next time. Just a thought.
Good point. Here's what I get. One of the takes I have out of the Eagles schedule, and I readily admit it has changed. For years, people made too much of a big deal out of, oh, they're going to play a first place schedule. Oh my God, so hard because it's first place schedule. It affected 2 of 16 games. That's it. Otherwise, your schedule was exactly the same as the other 3 teams in your division. There were 2 games where you potentially drew a tougher opponent. I say potentially because you don't know one season from another. The season before, they were the 2 first place teams that you're playing out of division within conference. But for the given year, they might not be as good as they were the previous season. Well, now it's up to 3. And this year you are paying a price because you're getting the Kansas City Chiefs rather than the Chargers, the Raiders, or the Broncos. And I'd really rather have the Chargers, the Raiders, or the Broncos than playing the Chiefs. So that, to me, is the one aspect of the schedule that they knew they were drawing tough. It happens to be the AFC West this year. It happens to be they're going to Kansas City this game. That's the biggest game on the schedule. I know it's an out-of-conference game, so as per tiebreakers, it doesn't have the impetus and gravitas that a divisional game would or even a conference game would. But the rematch of the Super Bowl, Week 11, key juncture of the season, both teams coming off byes, and we know full well that Andy Reid's really good after a bye because we had him here doing it for us for so many years here in town. That's far and away the most important and the biggest game on the schedule, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, outside of your Cowboys games that we all love to get up for.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with Jody, but go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I agree in terms of the sense that the Super Bowl rematch, you're going to have the fans who are like, all right, let's go beat them now since we lost to them in the Super Bowl and all that. And Andy Reid and all the same storylines we revisited. To me, I'd put it up there, right, with the Cowboys games. But I think because of winning the division and that's your goal and what you want out of it. But to go to what you talked about with the first place schedule, and I don't know, the makeup of this team and the leaders on this team, like a Jalen Hurts and a Nick Sirianni even, I don't think Jalen wants the patty cakes. I think Jalen wants the big dogs. And I think this team overall likes measuring stick games and saying, let's see where we are against the best of the best. And they're going to get plenty of opportunities to do that. Now, where it hurts you, obviously, is if you don't win those games, home field in the playoffs, because it's a record league. If you have an easier schedule, like people want to say the Eagles did last year, they cashed it in for home field throughout. Great. If you look at what the what the schedule could be this year and potential losses along the way with difficult opponents, well, your road to the Super Bowl is a little different. But you might be more battle tested. You might have a better beat on what you need to fix throughout the season than rolling over people all the time. And what you see and what you feel on Jalen Hurts is I think this guy wants the tougher schedule, wants the ability every week to go out there. I mean, if you can't get up for a game in this schedule, there's a real problem because there's somebody every week waiting to take you down with a target on your back with somebody just as good on the other side. I think they're the better teams. I think they top to bottom have a better shot if they can stay healthy of doing it. But, to go back to your original point, I think your Cowboys games are huge. I think Christmas Day against the Giants is going to have a little flair to it. And I think, of course, the Chiefs, if you want to go biggest non-conference game to me, I'd go there with the Bills a close second.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a feel standpoint, I get what Jody is saying. I mean, you beat the best team in football, but from a practical standpoint, I mean, that game doesn't even matter, really, if you think about the larger picture. What's your goal? Your goal is getting back to the Super Bowl. Your first goal, if you think about the Eagles and how they set up the two times they made it in recent years, number one seed, right? You got to get that number one seed. You got to force teams to come to Lincoln Financial Field where they dominated. Ironically, they've had 4 playoff games, right? In 52, 57. The only one who didn't get blown off the field was Atlanta, shockingly, in the divisional round back before Super Bowl 52. Minnesota blown out. Giants blown out. San Francisco blown out. That's what they got to get. They got to get the number one seed. And that Kansas City game, if you're going to be honest, isn't even going to matter. That to the tiebreakers, anything from that perspective, they got to beat the Cowboys. They got to beat the Giants. They got to beat the Commanders. They got to win their NFC games. The San Francisco game is far more important because, in theory, the 3 best teams in the NFC are going to be Eagles, Cowboys, 49ers, and that 49ers game could be the difference between number one seed and going out to Santa Clara, and where revenge, might be real from the 49ers perspective at that point. So that's kind of how beating the Chiefs would be a great from a feel, as I said, a feel standpoint. It would make everybody feel good. But the real world effects of that, not nearly as important as some of those conference games.
Here's the reason why. And we all have our own projections as to what the Eagles are going to do before the season starts. I think they're going to finish with the best record in the NFC again. And I don't think there will be a tie, and we'll have to go to a tiebreaker. So when it's all said and done and the Eagles have, and maybe I should take my Eagle-colored glasses off here, but this is the way I think it's going to play out. when we're all said and done and the playoffs begin and the Eagles have the number 1 seed, will we look back and go, yeah, and they beat Kansas City too? Will we put more of an emphasis on that than the 49ers or the Cowboys or whatever? We may very well. You're right. The tiebreakers, conference division games most important, conference games second most important, against the other conference third most important. But I think the Eagles are going to finish with the best record clear without having to get the tiebreakers. So then what game am I going to look back at it and go, man, they beat Kansas City on the road. They went in and took care of the Chiefs in their house. Yeah, that's why I make that their most important game. It starts from a position of maybe over-optimism, but that's where I sit right now as to how the season's going to go.
Well, and as we've pointed out in this conversation, I think you guys are going to have a great time in season because every week there is a storyline on this schedule that is going to drive the week for us, and all of us are going to have plenty to talk about each and every week with what's at stake, who they're playing up against, what kind of a test is this, where are they going to be tested in this regard or that regard. Look, there's good tests on the schedule for this defense. I mean, that's when you look at it, like I want to see what this defense does. What does it look like under Desai? How do these new pieces interact?